Hello, high level listeners, and welcome back to High Level Listening. Today's advanced B2 and C1 English discussion is about one of the most divisive workplace debates in the last few years: working from home, hybrid work, and return to office mandates.
Yes, we think this is a great topic for B2 and C1 listening practice because it's not always a simple good, bad debate. And it touches on lots of different topics like autonomy, productivity, trust, company culture, management style, commuting, morale, and the relationship between workers and employers as well.
So, what happens exactly when a company gives people flexibility for years and then suddenly takes it back? Is it just a normal business decision, or does it quietly change the relationship between employer and employee?
Yeah, and then there's the bigger question. If someone can do their job well at home, what exactly are they proving by sitting in an office for 5 days a week? Are they really more productive over there? Or are they just more visible and they can be tracked more easily?
And so this conversation feels especially real because a friend of mine recently mentioned that his company has announced this looming return to office mandate. And for the last few years, most of the employees had been working remotely most of the time, with some optional office days depending on the team. But now that the company is moving toward a stricter policy, people are trying to work out what that actually means for their future. On paper, it sounds like a simple location change. But in reality, it affects people's routines, their finances, their stress levels, of course, their family life, and this sense of being trusted as well.
Then what makes it even more complicated is that most people aren't completely against going to the office. A lot of employees understand that in-person work can be useful for training or collaboration, having difficult conversations or team building and mentoring. But they can become frustrated when office attendance feels kind of arbitrary or pointless, when people are asked to commute just to sit in a different chair and join the same online meetings.
Absolutely. So today we're going to look at this debate in kind of three parts. We'll discuss why a hybrid schedule makes sense for a lot of people, but also where it can kind of get messy and quite ineffective in the end. Then we'll look at the case for and against going back to the office full time. And finally, we'll debate whether return to office mandates could damage morale in the long term. So let's start with part one. This is kind of the statement that we'll be chatting about. Hybrid work makes sense for a lot of people, but only if it's genuinely flexible. Interesting thought. So I think this is the most balanced place to start. And this would be with the hybrid work, because for a lot of people, it feels like the most realistic middle ground. A hybrid schedule is a flexible model where employees split their time between remote work and in-office days. So they might work from home for part of the week and come into the office on other days, or they might adjust their location depending on the needs of the team. The point is not simply go to the office sometimes or when you feel like it. The point is that the work location becomes more flexible and more connected to the actual nature of the work, not just come in Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah, well, you can see why it's quite appealing because it gives employees a degree of autonomy or independence, and it doesn't completely remove the office from their working life either. People working from home can still benefit from quiet, focused time, especially for tasks that require concentration or preparation on planning. And they also still have the opportunity to meet their colleagues. They can still build relationships. They can go to the office and learn informally or participate in the social and the collaborative side of the workplace. So in theory, hybrid work avoids the extremes of both models and gives the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and I think the strongest argument for hybrid work is that it recognizes this basic reality that work is not one single activity. Some work is independent, some work is collaborative, some conversations can happen perfectly well online, while others are better face to face. Things like if you're writing a report, writing code, preparing a presentation, working through a very complicated task, it might be better for you to just be sitting at home alone by yourself without being bothered by anybody else. But if you're training a new employee or if you're solving a very messy problem, maybe you're trying to build trust or bonding more with your team, or you're having a very sensitive conversation, being physically together can definitely add some real value. So Also, from what my friends have told me as well, there is also an air of professionalism if you're trying to impress your boss or show someone you're putting in the time in person by actually, yes, being there in person.
I agree with that in principle, but hybrid work can become ineffective when it's treated as a sort of vague compromise rather than a properly designed system. I've seen companies put it into job listings just to attract people. We have a
Mhm.
hybrid system and it's not really well thought through. If someone or if everyone chooses different office days, then the office can almost become just symbolic and a token gesture. You commute in, realize half of your team is at home, and then you spend the whole day on video calls anyway. And at that point, the company's just added inconvenience without actually improving or creating any real collaboration. So hybrid work definitely needs coordination. It needs some shared expectations and clear communication and some boundaries. It needs some logic about why people come in and when.
Well, yeah, and that's where I think a lot of companies and CEOs are getting it wrong. They focus on the number of days instead of the purpose behind those days. They say, okay, everyone must come in 3 days a week, but they don't explain why 3 days is the right number, what employees are supposed to gain from being there, or even how the office will be used differently from just sitting in front of your computer at home, right? Doing remote work. And employees definitely notice that. We're not stupid, right? If the policy feels arbitrary, people start to question this motive behind it. What is the real goal? Is it collaboration? Is it control? Is it visibility? Or is it simply a return to what managers and CEOs were used to before?
Yeah. And then looking at that in terms of productivity, someone could be physically present and still be mentally checked out. How many jokes do you hear about being in the office and pretending to work or quickly closing solitaire when your boss walks up behind you? You can sit at a desk, you can answer some emails, attend some meetings, and still not produce anything particularly valuable. But that same person at home might be less visible and physically present in the office, but they could be producing focused, high quality work. So there's benefits of both. A hybrid model needs to be taken seriously and based on sort of outcomes and trust, not just the comforting image of people sitting in an office. So in the second point, we'll focus more on going back to the office full time, 5 days a week, 9 to 5. We'll look at some ideas for it and against it. So the full-time office argument, I think it deserves a fair hearing, not because it's always about control and old-fashioned management, but the strongest argument for it is that the office creates a structure, a rhythm, there's a social connection, and there's this chance for informal learning. For some employees, especially people who are new to a company or quite early in their careers, just physically being around your colleagues can be incredibly valuable. You might be listening, or you might overhear how someone handles a difficult client or a difficult situation. You might notice how your manager phrases something in a meeting, or you might ask a quick question in a conversation, and slowly you'll start to absorb these extra skills and the unwritten rules of the workplace and maybe the corporate culture in your industry or across the whole country. And that doesn't need to be a training document, a video, and that kind of professional development is quite hard to measure, but it can shape someone's long-term professional skills, their competence, and their confidence too.
And honestly, as someone with Zoom fatigue, I definitely think that that was one of the strongest arguments is that kind of connection that you feel being around somebody physically and in the same room with them, right? And I do agree with that up to a point, right? It's true that some learning happens through observation, repetition, seeing people's body language and their reactions to things. It's also true that working from home can feel isolating for some, especially if your home setup is poor or if you're new and you don't know who to ask for help. It's really hard to build those relationships with people that you might just see their names in an email, right? But I'd kind of like to push back on the idea that the office automatically creates those benefits. Yeah, those sound like great benefits, but that's not in every office environment, right? Plenty of people go into the office and spend the whole day wearing headphones, answering emails and joining video calls with people who aren't even in the same building. That doesn't really create culture. It just adds a commute to a modern remote style workday.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I still think there are certain forms of coordination that are easier in person. When a project is complicated, maybe where there are lots of moving parts, or when people are misunderstanding each other, being together can reduce friction. It's very easy to misinterpret a message or an email as maybe being passive aggressive or a little bit curt and short, whereas in person you can show more clearly how you feel. A 10-minute conversation in person can sometimes solve a problem that would have been a 2-day email chain. And I think from a company's point of view, that's really important because they're not only thinking whether employees are productive today, they're thinking about whether the organization is developing the next generation, the future managers, transferring the knowledge of the institution and maintaining enough trust for people to work through these complex problems together.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that, but the danger is that companies take a real concern and turn it into a blunt policy. Yeah, the office can support training, mentoring, coordination, culture, but that doesn't mean everyone needs to be there 5 days a week for that. Full-time office work treats all employees, all tasks, and all personal situations as if they're basically the same. And they're not. Someone who lives 10 minutes from the office and enjoys the social side of work may experience the policy very differently from someone with a long commute, carrying responsibilities for their family, health issues, or a job that requires long periods of uninterrupted concentration.
Yes, I agree. And that's when the cost of full-time office work becomes much more clear. For the company, from their point of view, bringing everyone back looks simple and easy. That's what it normally is. And everyone's in their place and the managers can see everyone. Everyone's got a desk and there's less uncertainty. But for employees, that simplicity, that schedule has a big personal cost. It might mean 10 extra hours of commuting each week. And that also means higher transport costs. There's less sleep. There's less time for exercise, less time for your family, and overall just more stress just to attend the office building. So even if the office creates some benefits, the question is whether those benefits are strong enough to justify the emotional, physical cost for everyone else.
Well, exactly. And I think companies are underestimating just how much people's expectations have changed over the past 5 years. Before remote work became normal, a long commute was just part of adult life. I mean, I remember commuting for the first time when I was 21 and thinking, oh, well, this is it. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of your life. You get up early, you rush out the door, you sit in traffic or on a crowded train, you work all day, you come home tired, and you try to fit your personal life into whatever energy you have left. But look, after people experienced a different way of working, especially during COVID, that routine started to seem less inevitable and more negotiable, right? So when a company says, we need everyone back full time, well, no, employees are not just comparing their office work to some abstract ideal. Oh, I wish I had time for myself. No, they're comparing it to a version that they already have and they've already experienced and changed their life to fit around. So what's the point of living in this efficient modern world if we can't benefit from these tools and programs that allow us more time to live our lives?
Yeah, companies had to drag their employees back to the office once we realized, or COVID showed that working from home was so viable. Yeah, no wonder people didn't want to go back.
Okay, so let's kind of go into the deepest topic that we'll be talking about. Return to office mandates may hurt morale in the long term. Okay, so definitely this return to office mandate, this is definitely where I feel more strongly. Even if a company has legitimate reasons for wanting people back in the office, a strict return to office mandate could damage the morale in the long term. Why? Because it changes the emotional contract now between employer and employee. For years, many employees proved very, very well and independently that they could work remotely or semi-remotely while still meeting deadlines, attending meetings, supporting clients, and keeping the projects moving. So when a company suddenly says, actually, we need you back because this is better for the business, is it? Or maybe in reality, it's just better for the shareholders. Maybe they like that visibility. Maybe they like seeing people working steadily in an office. People don't just hear this practical instruction. They feel more like it's a withdrawal of trust.
Yes, it almost seemed like a sort of vengeful decision, and quite an emotional one. And so it can make employees feel like their judgment, their productivity just didn't matter if they did it from home. Their performance suddenly seems less important than their physical presence. And then once that feeling sets in, it's quite hard to ignore. And a company can send out these polished internal messages about culture, collaboration, we're family here. But if employees start to believe that the real motivation is just control, optics, or managerial comfort, then morale takes a big hit. And people might comply with the policy and still go back to work, but compliance is not the same as commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Compliance is not the same as commitment. So people may show up because they have to. Their job literally depends on it. They may sit at their desk, attend the meetings that they have to, and follow the rules. But emotionally, they're probably going to start to detach. They might stop volunteering to help with extra projects. They might stop recommending the company to talented friends. They might stop believing that leadership understands the reality. Then you definitely feel a disconnect there. And that kind of disengagement is dangerous because morale doesn't just collapse overnight. It really just slowly leaks out of the organization.
Say, if I could play devil's advocate, though, companies do have to make these decisions at scale. They can't always design a perfect individual schedule for every single employee. If every person negotiates their own unique arrangement, the system can become nearly impossible to manage, and especially if it's a large organization. So I see from the company's perspective, a return to office mandate might be an attempt to just restore some consistency and simplify the coordination of thousands of employees and build a sort of shared workspace culture that's become very fragmented recently.
Okay, yes. And while I do love the idea that a CEO wants what's best for his employees, let's be real and consider that forcing a return to the office could cause a huge portion of employees that have gotten used to remote work to simply resign. The CEO gets the outcome that's similar to a layoff without actually conducting a layoff with all the negative connotation that that would involve. Plus, they don't have to pay severance, unemployment, et cetera, on these people that are going to resign because of a return to office mandate.
Yes, I did see lots of examples of that. Or pushing them out, making them jump rather than pushing them by changing, by kind of pulling the rug. I saw a lot of companies promise to keep the work from home or the hybrid schedule and then suddenly change their minds. And yeah, a lot of people left in droves. And that's another issue. If a company uses a return to office mandate as a way to encourage them to leave, it's very risky. It looks like a way to reduce headcount without formal layoffs, which is bad optics and bad PR. But they can't choose who leaves. It might be the people with the most experience, the best performers, or people with very rare skills. They might be the first to find something more flexible elsewhere, especially if they have valuable skills. So the company might solve one problem, but create a more serious retention problem.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because if the people don't leave immediately, you'll create some cynicism. Employees might start thinking, well, if they don't trust me with my schedule, what else don't they trust me with? Or if they're willing to take this away without a convincing explanation, why should I go the extra mile for them? And that matters a lot because a lot of valuable work depends on discretionary effort, the effort people choose to give because they feel respected, motivated, and invested in their company. I mean, you can force attendance, but you can't force genuine engagement.
Be no more banana bread at work if you hate your company. And that's the real issue. Well, interesting thoughts there from both sides. And now we'd love to hear from you. What do you think about this work from home, hybrid work, or purely in the office system? Do you think hybrid work is the best middle ground or compromise? Do you think people should go back to the office full time? Or do you think that returning to office just hurts the morale of the people in the long run?
We've had so many great comments from our students in these B2 and C1 level discussions, wonderful perspectives from all types of employees, all types of people. And we would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. We read and reply to every single one, and we love hearing your opinions as well.
Yes, well, thank you very much for listening and for studying with us here on High Level Listening. We'll see you very soon for another video. Bye-bye.